The weight of dreams pressed heavily on Amir as he walked through the sleeping streets of Tehran. City lights were muted, blurred by a thin haze, and he carried a heavy bag. Inside, law books shared space with a worn notebook filled with old songs and melodies from a past life. Amir was a law graduate, sharp and full of ambition. His dream was simple, yet seemed so far away. He wanted to be a judge, to sit in a respected chair and dispense justice. But his past, a whisper of music and late nights, clung to him like a shadow he could not quite shake off in this city of tradition. The night shift was his current reality, a dimly lit office with the quiet hum of computers. This was not the courtroom he envisioned. It was a place of waiting, of biding time. His musical past, they said, was not suitable for a man who aspired to the bench. So he worked when the city slept, sorting papers and filing reports, his mind often drifting to the scales of justice and the weight of a gavel. He wore a simple dark jacket, practical for the cool nights. His face, often tired, still held a spark of that unyielding dream. He remembered the passion for music, the joy of creation, the camaraderie of his band. Those days felt like another lifetime now. He had chosen law, a path of perceived stability and honor. Yet the music was a part of his soul, a part he had to suppress, to hide. Tehran was a city of many faces, some smiling, some stern, and the stern faces often held power, deciding who was worthy, who fit the mold. Amir tried to fit, he tried very hard every single night. The silence of the office pressed in. Sometimes his colleague Memli would share a quiet word. Memli understood the city's rhythms, its unspoken rules, but mostly Amir was alone with his thoughts. The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous tune. His dream of being a judge seemed to mock him in this sterile environment. He would glance at his reflection in the dark window, a man in a modest shirt, his eyes weary. The city outside whispered its secrets, but Amir only heard the echo of his own deferred hopes. Pari waited at home, their small apartment filled with the scent of saffron tea. Made just the way Amir liked it, she wore a simple, comfortable dress, her hair tied back. Pari loved Amir deeply and believed in his dream. She had seen the fire in his eyes when he spoke of justice, but the night shifts were a growing chasm between them. He came home when the sun was rising, tired and distant as she left for her own day, their lives increasingly out of sync. Their conversations became shorter, strained, and little misunderstandings grew into silences. Pari remembered when they would talk for hours about everything, about nothing. Laughter used to fill their home. Now, an unspoken tension lingered in the air. She would look at his sleeping face, etched with fatigue, and a pang of worry, a knot of fear would tighten in her chest. Was it just the job? Or was something more changing, something vital to their connection? She longed for the warmth they once shared so easily, the unspoken understanding. Pari tried to be supportive, leaving him notes and preparing his meals. She understood the sacrifices he was making, but the loneliness was a heavy cloak. Their friends, other couples, lived lives in the daylight, sharing evenings and weekends. Pari often found herself alone, staring out at the bustling Tehran streets from their window. The city was alive and vibrant, but in her heart a quiet sorrow began to bloom. She missed his smile, the easy way he used to hold her hand. She saw the toll it was taking on him too, the frustration, the weariness. His dream of becoming a judge was a noble one, but the path was proving to be arduous and isolating. Pari worried about the cost to him, the cost to them. She would light a candle sometimes, a small flame of hope in their darkening apartment, praying for things to get better, for the return of the Amir she knew, the husband she loved. The city outside hummed with life, but inside Pari felt a growing stillness, a creeping chill. Then, Afsun became Amir's new boss. She was different, confident, professional, with an air of authority that was undeniable. She noticed Amir quickly, seeing his diligence and intelligence. She saw more than just a night shift worker. Afsun dressed smartly in well-tailored coats and headscarves that spoke of a modern, assertive woman. Her office was brighter, more organized, bringing a new energy to the quiet, nocturnal world of their department. She was a woman who knew what she wanted and was not afraid to pursue it. Afsun began to speak with Amir more often, not just about work. She asked about his studies, his ambitions, and she seemed genuinely interested. She offered him small opportunities, tasks that challenged him and made him feel seen. For Amir, this was a flicker of recognition, a sign that perhaps his efforts were not entirely invisible. Afsun's direct gaze was unnerving at times, but also validating. She spoke of progress, of moving forward, words that resonated with his own deep desires. She would sometimes stay late, working alongside him, and the office felt less empty with her presence. They would share a late-night cup of tea, discussing cases or sometimes more personal aspirations. Afsun was a good listener, and she didn't judge his musical past. In fact, she seemed intrigued by it. This was a refreshing change for Amir. He found himself looking forward to these interactions. It was a small break from the monotony, a hint of something different in his otherwise predictable nights. But Afsun's interest was not purely professional. There was an undercurrent, a subtle shift in her tone, a lingering look. Amir, focused on his work and his dream, was perhaps slow to notice, or perhaps he chose not to. He was a married man. Pari was his life, but Afsun represented something else, a connection to the professional world he yearned for, a powerful woman who saw his potential. The dynamics in the quiet night office were beginning to change, subtly but surely. Pari began to notice the changes in Amir, small things at first. A new energy when he spoke of work, a name mentioned more frequently. Afsun. He was more preoccupied, his thoughts often elsewhere, even when he was home. The distance between them, already a source of pain, seemed to widen. Pari's heart, already bruised by loneliness, now felt the sharp sting of suspicion. Who was this Afsun? Why did she command so much of Amir's attention, his thoughts? The late nights became later. Sometimes he would come home with a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes. Pari would lie awake, her mind racing. She imagined scenarios, conversations, jealousy, a bitter poison started to seep into her soul. She tried to dismiss her fears, to trust Amir, but the doubt was a persistent whisper, growing louder each day. She would ask him about his boss, about his work. His answers were often brief, sometimes evasive. This only fueled her anxiety. She started to feel insecure, looking at herself in the mirror. Was she not enough? Had the strain of their life pushed him away? She remembered the early days of their love, so full of hope and certainty. Now uncertainty was her constant companion. The modest clothes she wore, the simple life they led, suddenly felt inadequate. She saw other women on the streets of Tehran, confident, stylish, like Afsun perhaps. The thought was a fresh stab of pain. Pari's friends noticed her distress, offering comfort and advice, but their words could not soothe the turmoil within her. The fear of losing Amir, of their life together crumbling, was overwhelming. She felt helpless, adrift. The city, with its endless motion and noise, seemed indifferent to her quiet suffering. The love she had nurtured so carefully felt fragile, threatened, and the name Afsun echoed in her mind, a symbol of everything she feared. Section 5. Seeking Solace, the Mystic's Path. Desperate for answers, for reassurance, Pari turned to other avenues. Her mother had always spoken of mystics, of those who could see beyond the veil. Pari, a modern woman, in many ways found herself drawn to these ancient practices. She sought out a fortune teller in a quiet, old neighborhood of Tehran. The air in the small room was thick with incense and unspoken secrets. She clutched a photograph of Amir, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The fortune teller, an old woman with knowing eyes, listened to Pari's story. She spread a well-worn deck of cards. She spoke of shadows, of outside influences, of a woman with dark hair. Pari's blood ran cold. The vague pronouncements seemed to confirm her worst fears. The mystic offered charms, prayers, rituals to protect her marriage, to bring Amir back to her. Pari, lost in her emotional storm, clung to these promises. She paid the woman a small token of her dwindling hope. She started performing the rituals in secret, lighting specific candles, reciting verses. She hoped for a miracle, a sign that things would change. This reliance on mystics was a departure from her usual pragmatic self, but logic and reason had failed to ease her pain. She felt she had no one else to turn to. Amir was distant. Her friends could only offer sympathy. The spiritual world seemed to offer a tangible path, a way to fight back against the forces she felt were destroying her happiness. But the visits to the fortune teller brought only temporary comfort. The doubt remained, a persistent ache. The rituals felt like a desperate charade at times. Yet, she continued, it was something to do, a way to channel her anxiety. The city of Tehran, with its grand mosques and ancient traditions, had always held a spiritual undercurrent. Pari, in her distress, had tapped into this hidden world. She was seeking not just answers, but a sense of control in a situation where she felt utterly powerless. Section 6. Tehran's unseen eyes, social pressures. In Tehran, life is lived under a complex web of social expectations. Neighbors watch, families have opinions, reputations are fragile things, easily tarnished. Amir and Pari's struggles did not go unnoticed. Whispers began to circulate, subtle at first, then more pronounced. Why was Amir working such odd hours? Why did Pari look so unhappy? The community's unseen eyes were always judging, always assessing. This added another layer of pressure to their already strained lives. Amir felt the weight of these unspoken judgments. His musical past had already marked him as slightly unconventional. Now his night job, his association with a modern, assertive boss like Afsun, fueled further speculation. He tried to maintain a dignified front. He dressed modestly, spoke politely, but he knew people were talking. This was Tehran, a city where appearances mattered, where conformity was often prized above individuality. His dream of being a judge required an impeccable reputation. He feared these whispers could damage his chances. Pari, too, felt the scrutiny. When she went to the local bakery or the market, she sensed the curious glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when she approached. It made her feel exposed, vulnerable. Her modest chador, a symbol of her piety and respectability, felt like a thin shield against the prying eyes. She longed for anonymity, for a place where her private pain was not public spectacle. The social fabric of their lives, once comforting, now felt constricting. The pressure came from family as well. Concerned relatives offered advice, often unsolicited. They spoke of duty, of compromise, of the importance of maintaining a stable home. Their words, though well-intentioned, often felt like criticisms. Pari and Amir found themselves defending their choices, their lives, to people who could not fully understand their individual struggles. The vibrant, bustling city, with its strong communal ties, also possessed a capacity for quiet, relentless social pressure that could wear down even the strongest spirits. Section 7. The night shift's toll confrontations loom. The long nights, the mounting stress, and the growing suspicions began to take a visible toll on Amir and Pari. Amir grew more irritable, his patience thin. The small apartment, once a haven, now felt like a pressure cooker. Arguments became more frequent, more intense. Pari, fueled by jealousy and the fortune-teller's words, would question Amir relentlessly. About Afsun, about his late hours, about the distance she felt growing between them like an unbridgeable canyon. Amir, exhausted and defensive, would often react with anger. He felt misunderstood, unfairly accused. He was working hard, sacrificing his sleep, his well-being for their future, for his dream. Why couldn't Pari see that? Afsun was just his boss, a professional support. He failed to see, or perhaps refused to acknowledge, the subtle ways Afsun's attention might be perceived, or even the way it was subtly affecting him. He just wanted peace at home, but peace was becoming an elusive memory. One evening, the tension reached a breaking point. Pari confronted Amir with a charm the mystic had given her, accusing him of being ensnared by another woman. The accusation, so direct, so imbued with a belief in dark influences, stunned Amir. He saw not just jealousy in Pari's eyes, but a desperation that frightened him. Their argument was bitter, filled with harsh words and unspoken resentments that had festered for months. The modest walls of their apartment seemed to absorb their pain, their anger. The confrontation left them both shaken, the fragile threads of their connection stretched taut. The night shift, once just a practical necessity, now seemed like a malevolent force pulling them apart. Amir stormed out into the cool Tehran night, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere of their home. Pari was left alone, weeping amidst the remnants of their shattered evening. The city outside continued its nocturnal rhythm, oblivious to the quiet implosion of a love that had once seemed so strong. Section 8. Fractured trust, the unraveling. Trust, once the bedrock of Amir and Pari's relationship, was now deeply fractured. Pari's suspicions, nurtured by fear and the mystic's pronouncements, had taken root. She watched Amir's every move, analyzed his every word. The easy intimacy they once shared was replaced by a guardedness, a wariness. Amir, feeling constantly scrutinized and mistrusted, withdrew further. He found solace in his work, in the late-night conversations with Afsun, who offered understanding without judgment, a stark contrast to the turmoil at home. Afsun, meanwhile, perhaps sensed the growing rift between Amir and Pari. Her interest in Amir became less subtle, her encouragement more personal. She represented a different world for Amir, a world of professional ambition, intellectual stimulation, and perhaps an escape. He was increasingly drawn to her confidence, her belief in him. It was a dangerous attraction built on the foundations of his crumbling marriage and his own unfulfilled dreams. The lines between professional respect and personal connection began to blur under the dim office lights. Pari, in her anguish, clung ever tighter to the mystics and their remedies. She saw Afsun as a rival, a homewrecker, the embodiment of the dark forces the fortune-teller had described. Her perception of reality became tinged with paranoia. She saw signs and omens everywhere. Her modest clothing, her traditional values felt like a shield against a world she no longer understood, a world that seemed intent on stealing her husband. The city of Tehran, with its blend of modernity and ancient belief, became the backdrop for her increasingly desperate struggle. The unraveling was slow, painful. There were moments of attempted reconciliation, fleeting glimpses of the love they once shared. But the damage was too deep, the suspicions too ingrained. Memli, Amir's colleague, watched with concern, offering quiet, non-judgmental support to Amir, but he was powerless to mend the widening chasm. The dream Amir chased, the justice he wished to dispense, seemed a cruel irony as his own life descended into emotional chaos and mistrust. The night shift had claimed more than just his sleep, it was claiming his marriage. Section 9, Tehran's Echoes, An Unending Night. The story of Amir, Pari and Afsun is a story of Tehran itself, a city of dreams and disappointments, a place where tradition and modernity collide, often with painful consequences. Amir's ambition to be a judge, noble and pure, became entangled with the complexities of his past and the pressures of the present. His night shifts were more than just a job, they were a metaphor for a life lived in the shadows of societal expectation and personal compromise. His modest attire couldn't hide the turmoil within. Pari's journey from a loving wife to a desperate woman seeking solace in mysticism reflects a deeper anxiety. Her jealousy was not just about another woman, it was about the fear of losing her place, her security in a rapidly changing world. Her struggle to hold on to her marriage, her identity, played out against the backdrop of Tehran's urban sprawl, a city that demands resilience but offers few easy answers. Her traditional values clashed with the perceived threat of a more modern, assertive femininity embodied by Afsun. Afsun, in her own way, represented the shifting dynamics of power and ambition. Her interest in Amir, whether purely professional or something more, introduced an undeniable tension. She was a catalyst, forcing a confrontation with unspoken desires and unacknowledged dissatisfactions. The urban landscape of Tehran, with its bustling days and quiet, watchful nights, was the silent witness to these intertwined destinies, these human dramas unfolding in its offices and homes. The social tensions, the suspicions, were as much a part of the city as its ancient bazaars and modern highways. In the end, the emotional turmoil lingers. The resolutions, if any, are fraught with ambiguity, much like life itself. The authentic Iranian setting is not just a backdrop, it is an active participant in their story, shaping their choices, their fears, their hopes. Shift-e-Nimeh-Shab holds a mirror to the struggles of ordinary people caught in extraordinary emotional currents. The echoes of their story resonate in the quiet alleys and bustling streets of Tehran, a reminder that the night often brings forth our deepest vulnerabilities and our most profound longings.